many of you will remember I spoke last year about the importance of trying to look at what we need to do to accelerate the adoption of drones at scale in the UK. So part of it is really looking at where we've been to from last year, but more importantly, what we can see is that there are shoots of some of the aspects that are actually allowing us to go forward. So looking at it from a summary point of view is there's been quite a lot of what I would say UK support through investment in next generation green technology, there's the ATM modernisation, and there's the well-established Future Flight Challenge, which is all showing the support of the UK government for the UTM and drones ecosystem. Over the last 2 years, you can see there's been a significant build-up of test environments, generally on a small scale, but across the UK, which can be looking to test and show use cases about how you go forward. The regulatory environment, although frustrates many people in the industry, continues to develop. There's been multiple consultations, and there is a general focus on the technology that needs to be adapted, developed, and integrated to enable us to take the industry forward. And more importantly, the consumer is becoming engaged on as much the positive side of drones as well as the, what I would say, the established negative vibes of drones, particularly with the focus on use cases around support for the emergency services and also for NHS delivery. So there's a general environment that drones can do good. There still needs to be more evidence about it. Now, if you look at it, one of the things to go at scale is we continue to challenge what are the challenges to overcome. And you can see that there is a considerable thing about safe coexistence between manned and unmanned drones. There's a definition between what is airspace that needs to be protected versus how you integrate drones into the unsegregated airspace, particularly with the established users today. So the recreational users, the GA community, as well as the more formal systems. A regulatory framework and certification and security are paramount. It has to be safe to fly at scale. And it's not just safe about a drone operating, it's safe operations. And again, there's a lot of analysis at the moment about how many drones you can safely put in what you would call a square kilometre of airspace, about what is the technical limitations of UTM, what is the technical limitation of drones, how you can see other users, both cooperative and uncooperative. So the framework needs to evolve. It has to evolve for the drone community, the manned community, but also the recreational community. There's a lot of people who use the space, and we all have to be able to coexist. There are a lot of technology developments, and you can see in the show today about UAV systems and enabling technologies. Fundamentally, we're still coming down to 3 core areas that are important. One is around electronic conspicuity. How can we be seen or see others, both whether you're cooperative, uncooperative? How do you take forward the integration into UTM so you can dynamic management, and how do you integrate that between manned and unmanned? And also, how do you do the detect and avoid technology to do it that it's across all capabilities? And one of the challenges I think for scaling is this technology has to be, whether you're talking about transponders, communications, it has to be able to be applicable to a vast volume. If you're looking at the numbers that people are talking about, commercial drones from 2030. So it's a big ask for the technology, how it's integrated, and a systems approach. Taking that behind on a technology side is one side, but also just as important are the 2 things about how do you make commercial drone services work, how do you finance the infrastructure that needs to be there to enable it to operate at scale, and how do you get over the public acceptance that most people don't want to hear a drone or see a drone. And they're also historical worry that they're going to fall out of the sky if you can see them. So those are the challenges we've got. So from a Thales perspective, we continue to look at what would be the 4 tenets about what we have to go forward. So there are lots of technologies. The technologies is dramatically evolving. It's about how do you integrate the technologies and how do you enable that to show safe flight, safe operation. Everything is around safety. The regulations are evolving, but there is going to have to be more regulation. We're all talking about maturing regulation. Regulation will put structure around the environment we operate. It will also likely drive costs by mandating technology minimum standards, depending on the type of operations you're doing. There is a big social element, because although we spend a lot of time about doing use cases about drones for good, there is still a significant public resistance about drones, particularly on things like last mile delivery, where it's seen to be in their space. So there is a conflict between seeing good for emergency services, NHS, critical deliveries, but for the equivalent of doing your local Amazon delivery, not seeing the social support. And that will look at very much at how we need to be working with local planning authorities and how drones are integrated into the local environment, the planning environment. That then brings in the whole aspect also of how you integrate in vertiports or other ports outside of the airport infrastructure. That's all got a social planning dimension, which will be very much dependent on which area you are in. All of this then looks at the economics, because the economics, you need to pay for UTM, you need to pay for technology, you need to pay for how this system goes. At the moment, the modelling isn't there, and it's done on a very small scale. When you're talking a much larger scale, there's different economics to be there. So, technology as a whole, there's loads of it. You've got the ground-based radars, you've got drones, you've got UTMs. I mean, we have a product of scale flight, which is a lot of the technology you can put on board a drone, from anti-jamming, resilient comms, remote ID, geocaching, and even in Thales, we're building a civil drone which takes the whole technology concept so that we can offer drone services. But the technology is there, and it's built, and it's always maturing very dynamically in the environment. The challenge, a lot of it, is how do you integrate from the onboard technology with the ground-based technology to provide a total ecosystem. And the challenge also about that is how do you certify? So Thales is taking our drone through the EASA certification. We're doing trials today where we're at SAL level 3. Next year we're looking at taking our drone operations through SAL 4 and 5, particularly to enable to do from our perspective, the use cases around surveillance, monitoring, and support for emergency services. That process is not quick, but the more goes through the process and takes through that underpinning to make sure the drone and the operations is safe, the more it will speed up over time. It is an arduous process, but at the end of it, we have an ability to demonstrate that we have a safe drone and safe operations. In the UK, a real challenge, and this is some analysis, is just a snapshot we took in May this year, of the complexity of the airspace we operate. And it's just looking at the major, danger areas, prohibited areas, aerodromes, restricted areas, private notification. And this is all about showing the complexity. That's the established case. If you're then adding in drones, and you can debate whether you're talking 75,000, 100,000 drones, how are you going to integrate that so that they are enhancing the use of the airspace and not inhibiting others that are air to there? It is a very complicated picture, and it is not something that we can solve today. It is going to be a journey. Now, if you look at that, we're very much keen about making sure that you look at the incremental journey through the ecosystem. So you've got to look at what's I would call the UAS services, which is very much around the weather and so forth. You've got a software infrastructure for integrating into the UTM and the airspace management, but you've also got a physical infrastructure, whether it's a comms network, your transponders, your radars. There's an integration between what would be a very software-driven, physical-driven, but also the services. It's all about integrating. If you then take that forward and you look at UAS requires a multidisciplinary approach. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's sort of where we focus on the top bit of the iceberg and we tend to put into the back layer what's in what I would call below the surface. And so there's a lot of things about physical and remote infrastructure, cybersecurity, support systems. All of that side is not necessarily at the forefront. And that's why, if you look at it, a lot of the discussion today is about how do you accelerate the delivery of the infrastructure, the comms network, the sensor network, the physical infrastructure, the vertiports. How do you get that so that you can integrate the wider system? If you then look at it under all of this, going in the sense of is you've got a business case challenge. You've got lots of use cases which at the moment today are very bespoke, ad hoc, and are done at small scale, generally done very locally, not necessarily across the UK. And it's now trying to get acceptance and ability to demonstrate that these services can be done robust and do add value to the local economy. The challenge also for drones is the variety of use cases. So it's not that we've just got one application. It's very much that there is a broad application from monitoring and surveillance, support for emergency services, last mile delivery. It's a wide usage of applications. There's a wide usage of risk in the sense of how the operations are going to be conducted, debate about whether it's agriculture or urban areas. So there's a big debate about that. And again, what is the cost drivers to make that a viable long-term economic solution? So I keep coming back to it, and I think it's a topic that has always remained underestimated. And if I look at even my close family, knowing that I'm an advocate of drone services, there is still significant resistance about, okay, but not in my backyard. And that is a real problem in the sense of getting them adopted at scale. There will be continuing to be adoption of services that are seen to be good for the local economy. So therefore, where it's seen to be a positive, where the health services, emergency services get a lot of support. Again, those are seen to be as and when needed, not day in, day out. And there's still an issue about drones being seen, noisy, and perceived today to not be safe in the sky. And it is very much an image of the industry that we have to overcome. I live in a rural area, and it's lovely to come to London, but in our area, the discussion about drone services, and that's just for photography generally, is do not interfere or scare the livestock. So there's, that is the prime planning consideration. It's not, necessarily the same drivers that are here today. I think there's a lot more to be done, particularly about integrating use cases and applications for services with the local planning authority. I think a lot of lessons have been held over from the Coventry vertiport earlier this year, and I think there's a good way forward about how that has to be integrated and how drones are integrated into the general transportation system. I think there's much more to be shared about how drones are good for particularly emergency services and delivery of critical items. And I think that there has to be more visibility on a sustained basis of drones doing a good service. At the moment, drones are still, as a service, generally a novelty, and it's to take it more forward that they're routine and it's just part of the furniture. So looking at that, from our perspective, we're looking that it's a roadmap that evolves over time, and I think you're looking at it is very much is that you're taking from a visual line of sight operations through BV loss and taking it through much further unregulated and protected airspace. And it's a journey, but the first thing for us is really to show safe operations, be able to then show through larger proof of concepts and more integration of the ecosystems into the industrialization to really take you out to the continuous evolution and the full integration. It is a long journey. We're only potentially just getting to the fact of at the end of really stage 3. So really we're only at that sort of stage of showing that working us through between a safe operation into something that can be industrialized at scale. And then finally, just to really summarize, there's a lot going on. It's a really dynamic sector. There's a lot of innovation, but we need to help mature the regulatory environment to come up with a standard and a framework that allows us to make sure that we're delivering the technology that provides the solutions. We need to focus on the key technologies that will deliver this and accelerate the delivery of a safe and secure solution. We need to really promote and accelerate the use cases that can be developed at scale and can be seen to promote and develop the industry. We need to be much better at explaining the benefit of drones and drones for good. And it's not to be ignoring the concerns, but showing pragmatic steps about how drones can add to the ecosystem that we have today. And really, one of the best ways to do that is to do it through showing, and that's through large-scale proof of concepts, both virtual and physical test environments that can show what we're able to achieve. And that is my speech. If there's any questions or anything else anyone would like to ask, please do. I don't think there's any questions. Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.